Hi there and welcome to another quick video from me, the History Tutor, and in this video we're looking at the AQA example topic of Elizabethan England, and we're looking at the write an account question, and we're going to explain some ideas about the Elizabethan Court. Okay, so many candidates find the write an account question a little bit tricky, but I'm going to give you some ideas on how to work through this question successfully. We're also going to talk about a tricky topic of politics and Elizabethan Court and revise our knowledge on that as we develop our answer for this question. So in the revision guide, find the pages on Elizabethan Court and Elizabethan politics and find the question on the write an account, and we'll go through that question in detail. Once you've had a look through those pages to recap your knowledge, join me again for a quick quiz. Okay, so here's a quick quiz about Elizabeth and her political control. So there's 8 questions there. Have a look through your revision guide, see if you can find the answers and fill them in the revision guide there. If you don't have my revision guide, well, why not? You should be buying it. Have a look in the Amazon links to find out more about it, and there's lots of videos like this. But if you haven't got my revision guide, you can sort of work out the questions. You can have a look at my videos on all of the topics to help revise your knowledge. Okay, so pause me now and see if you can answer the questions. Okay, so here's the answers. What were the main set of advisors to Elizabeth known as? Well, they're the Privy Council. They were like the government of the time. They were senior nobles who helped run the country. When we think about the court, Elizabethan Court, obviously nobles are going to be in the court. So one thing to consider about Elizabethan Court is they are going to help her run the country because the most significant members of the court are in the Privy Council, like a government running the country. So who kept control in the local areas? Well, that's the Justice of the Peace, and they were normally gentry people, and they were like local police and judges and court people. They'd have lots of important jobs like maybe collecting taxes or organising local courts, organising things like the poor law in the local area as well. So lots of important local area jobs. So who controlled the regions, the larger areas, raised taxes in those regions, organised a militia for security? Well, that was the Lord Lieutenants, and they would again be nobles. So this gives you an idea of court again. The court and the nobles would be helping to enable security against rebellions, for instance, in different areas. Name 2 groups of people in the royal court, and I've just given you answers already. I've said nobles. We also have ladies in waitings and servants of the nobles and of the Queen, and advisors as well, who often might be nobles. Who was Elizabeth's spymaster and helped control Mary Queen of Scots? That's Francis Walsingham, and he is obviously in the court, and therefore it shows how the court is helping with security because he is stopping Mary Queen of Scots rebellions. Who was Elizabeth's most consistent key advisor during her reign? That's William Cecil, or Lord Burleigh, as he might also be known. He is pretty much running the country for large periods of time, whereas he's the Secretary of State, which is almost like the equivalent to Prime Minister. Therefore, nobles are important and the court is important in running the country. How many times was Cecil Secretary of State? He was Secretary of State twice. Now, there are 2 Cecils. Be aware in the 1590s, Cecil the Younger is becoming important in the Privy Council, and he has his rivalry with Essex. So another thing about the court could be that there's rivalries and problems that Elizabeth has to manage, particularly between Essex and Cecil in the 1590s. And eventually that leads to the Essex Rebellion. And as I said already, the role closest to Prime Minister is the Secretary of State. So we've revised your knowledge a little bit, and we started identifying some ideas about this Elizabethan Court question already. Let's have a think about this question and what it actually means. So you'll always have a question in your exam that says write an account as its initial phrase. So we're going to think about what that means in terms of how we might answer a question. So more than any, this is probably the most important question we need to think about. What is the success criteria? Because what does it mean by write an account? How do we structure that? How do we answer that? Now it's 8 marks, so how many ideas do we need to explain? So jot down your ideas, your initial thoughts in the revision guide, or just have a think about it for a moment, and then I'll tell you some ideas about this write an account question. Okay, so firstly I want you to think about this write an account question of still being an explain question. So if you just put a line through write an account of, then you end up with explain the problems Elizabeth faced due to her court. So we're left with a rather simple question. Therefore, we can write in peel paragraphs. But we are going to recognise the fact it says write an account to some extent in our answer. So what we must be thinking about then in our second point here of our success criteria is you need to give an example of a problem Elizabeth faced due to court and then explain the impact or consequence. That's where the narrative bit comes in, the write an account bit. We're going to give example and then impact. So when you can explain 2 problems, with just simple point evidence explained for 6 marks. If we want to get 7 or 8 marks, we need to give a wider idea, doing furthermore and link to a wider problem of that issue we've raised by talking about different people, places and times to come up with an idea. Now, let's start thinking about this then. So I said it's example and then impact, or example then consequence. So you can literally plan this. You can think of an example and then the consequences of it. So let's have a think of an example of court actions and then consequences. So are there actions of the court, nobles or people that have caused problems? Is there rebellions, for instance? Have a think of some ideas now. You can note it down in a revision guide, some of your ideas. Okay, so here's some ideas. I've got that Cecil and others demand that Elizabeth should get married. Duke of Anjou or Dudley, for instance. We've also got another example of Norfolk supported rebellions with Mary Queen of Scots. We've got the Cecil and Essex arguments in the 1590s. We've got 3 examples. Each of them have some consequences. So Cecil and the marriage issue. So this led to problems. So Elizabeth could not marry Anjou due to the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. She could not marry Dudley due to court jealousy. So all this pushing for her to get married just simply caused further problems for Elizabeth. You could also say that it led to Parliament arguing with Elizabeth as well, because they got desperate for her to get married as well. So it led to problems. Then we can say Norfolk supported rebellions. So we've got the Northern Rebellion, Ridolfi plot to overthrow Elizabeth, and Norfolk had to be executed. So she had to make some really challenging, difficult decisions. And the arguments between Cecil and Essex eventually led to Essex's rebellion. He'd argued with Elizabeth, he'd stormed into her chambers, and eventually tried to remove her from power so that he could try and get around his rivalry with Cecil. So we have lots and lots of potential ideas. So how do we structure this? So we're going to say point. We're going to say one problem Elizabeth faced from her court was this. We're going to say an example. So for example, and we're going to give that example event. Then we're going to say this led to a problem because. And if you might have noticed already, there were 2 rebellions. So we could do obviously a furthermore and do another rebellion if we wanted to put rebellions in one paragraph. And I also talked about marriage having a problem with court and parliament. So there are possibly 2 ideas there as well. So let's give this a go then. We're going to talk about arguments about marriage and succession first of all then. So here is the opening sentence. Have a think about what example you would give to back this up. So I've said one problem that Elizabeth faced from her court was that there were arguments about her, but you can put in the word marriage as well, marriage and succession. So for example, okay, what do you think would be a good example? Obviously, we've got some good ideas in our plan already. So here's what I've gone for. I've said, for example, her court wanted her to marry. Cecil arranged for the Duke of Anjou to visit England and marriage negotiations began. So this led to a problem for Elizabeth as, okay, so what can you explain about this? Think about the impact of knowledge. See if you can explain a problem. Away you go. So I said this led to a problem for Elizabeth. Anjou was a French Catholic and the Protestants were not happy as a Catholic king might change the religion of England. Also, at the time of the marriage negotiations, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of Protestants in France took place. And people in England were in uproar, meaning Elizabeth could not marry Anjou. So she was obviously having problems keeping everyone happy because of this marriage negotiation. Can we think of a furthermore? Maybe we could talk about Parliament. Maybe we could talk about issues with Dudley. One of those 2 ideas would be great to talk about. Pause me now and think of a furthermore. Okay, so here I've gone for the Dudley example. So I've said, furthermore, Elizabeth could not marry Dudley as it would cause jealousy in court. This meant the court failed to solve the problem of marriage. Elizabeth lacked a clear succession, and the problem court had caused was that she couldn't marry. Now, I think the Parliament one would be actually maybe in some way stronger because it's like different people within the country, but it's not quite the court, is it, Parliament? So you'd have to carefully answer that one. Let's give an idea then for a second idea. So you might want to now talk about rivalries and rebellion perhaps. So you can definitely talk about Norfolk and then you can do a furthermore and connect to Cecil and Essex and get 2 rebellions into one paragraph. So you've got clearly 2 ideas being developed. So I'm not going to talk you through step by step. Pause me now and have a go at this paragraph. Remembering to give example, then impact. So you give your sort of basic idea of narrative. Okay, so here's what I've said. I've said another problem that Elizabeth faced from her court was that there were rivalries and rebellions. For example, Norfolk was a senior Catholic and he wanted to help Mary Queen of Scots take over and re-establish the Catholic religion. This led to a problem for Elizabeth as Norfolk supported the Northern Rebellion of Mary and the Northern Earls. He also supported the Ridolfi plot to kill Elizabeth and place Mary and Norfolk on the throne. This meant Elizabeth had to execute Norfolk and imprison Mary. So you could develop a bit further about the problem she had, but clearly we've already identified as a problem there. So furthermore, by the 1590s, young Cecil and Essex had a rivalry in court for who was the favourite. This led to the Essex Rebellion in 1603, as Essex wanted to remove Cecil faction and support James becoming King of England. Elizabeth had to execute Essex as well. Hopefully that question all makes sense now. When you think about the roles the court has and the problems they can cause, it becomes a little bit easier. There was a question in one of the recent years about explaining the importance of the court, and you can sort of reverse the roles around, can't you? The court stops rebellions. The court helps organise the country. The court is very important in encouraging Elizabeth to make decisions like marriage. So you can reverse it all around to explain their importance as well. No conclusion required to this question. It's simply write an account and explain your ideas. Okay, well, I hope you found that useful with your write and count question. And of course, if you think about still doing a P paragraph and it being an explain question, it does make it a lot more simplistic to think about rather than writing a story. Stories will only get you 3 or 4 marks, folks. You do need to explain the impact and the consequences. So if you found that useful, do have a look at my YouTube playlist for more videos to help, and also have a look in the links of my YouTube video here so that you can find a link to my Amazon page where you can look at my revision guides and think about maybe buying one with lots more help and really good revision notes to help you prepare for your exam. Okay, well, I hope you'll come back to my videos soon. Bye bye for now.